I'm going to read just a few quotes from the book Socialism, first published in English in 1936. Socialism is not the pioneer of a better and finer world, but the spoiler of what thousands of years of civilization have created. It does not build, it destroys, for destruction is the essence of it. It produces nothing. It only consumes what the social order based on private ownership in the means of production has created. Each step leading towards socialism must exhaust itself in the destruction of what already exists. And that was also, there was always a two-pronged strategy by the socialists. One, destroy the existing institutions of society, and then build their utopia, step two, whatever the utopia might be. Then he said something that reminded me a lot of Sweden and Venezuela. He said this: progressive capital formation is the only means by which the position of the great masses can be permanently improved. Socialism and destructionism propose to use up capital so as to achieve present wealth at the expense of the future. The policy of destructionism is the policy of the spendthrift who dissipates his inheritance regardless of the future. And the story of Sweden is that it was a great high economic liberty society in the late 19th, early 20th century. They had all these great entrepreneurs that created Volvo, automobiles, and all companies like that, Saab, and many others. And then when they adopted their version of socialism in the 1950s, they basically started eating up their capital and living off the efforts of previous generations until by the 1980s they had 500% interest rates. And they've been trying to escape from that ever since. And of course, Venezuela, the exact same thing. One of the wealthiest countries in Latin America for a long, long time. They adopted socialism basically in the 50s also. And each president that they elected since then, they adopted democracy in 1958, I think of as a bigger Castro-loving communist than the last guy. And look at what has happened to them. So they lived off the capital of the previous generation. A third quote from Mises, he said, for Karl Marx, quote, all politics was only the continuation of war by other means. The socialist parties who have taken the Marxist parties for their model have elaborated the technique of agitation, the caging for votes and for souls, the stirring up of electoral excitement, the street demonstrations, and the terrorism. And this reminds me of, I wrote notes here, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, Democratic Socialists of America, the muddle-headed, babbling students who set buildings on fire and scream in the faces of conservatives or libertarians who show up at places like Berkeley to give an invited lecture. That's nothing new. Mises observed that. He made a comment also on the fake news of his day. He said this, the literati are recruiting agents for socialism, since socialism must destroy society, and they are paving the way for destructionism, the literati. He also made a comment that I put in the politically correct category of commentary. He said this, peoples which have hailed with great enthusiasm writings which call for the destruction of all cultural values are themselves on the verge of a great social catastrophe. So he was criticizing what today we would call political correctness. And then he sort of concludes that our whole life is so given over to destructionism that one can name hardly a field into which it is not penetrated. Social art, he put quotation marks over social. Social art preaches it, schools teach it, the churches disseminate it. And so that's destructionism. And of course, he talks about the methods. He says, I'm going to have a brief discussion of some of the methods of destructionism. And this is 1922. Labor legislation, compulsory social insurance, unemployment insurance, nationalization, taxation, and inflation is what he writes about. And of course, in his day, he was also commenting on, if you look at the Communist Manifesto, which I use in a class. I have a class I teach called Capitalism and Its Critics, and I've had students read the Communist Manifesto and
stop being bullied by the IRS. Stop worrying for the IRS agents going.
And and then the works by socialism, the book Socialism, and go back and forth, the good guys and the bad guys. Read this. And one of my students told me, this is the fourth time I've been assigned the Communist Manifesto, but this is the first time it wasn't looked at as a roadmap to the future. It was very, very different. True story. That's absolutely true. And the same student once told me, I had no idea there were different schools of thought in economics. I thought it was all a system of equations, mathematical equations. Yeah, this is a junior economics major who told me that. And of course, if you look at the Commie Manifesto, it's a manifesto for how to destroy the existing capitalist society. Plank number 1, abolition of private property. Plank number 2, this is a direct quote, a heavy progressive or graduated income tax. Number 3, abolition of all rights of inheritance. That's another attack on private property. Number 4 is confiscation of land of those who speak out against the government. That's a direct quote from the Commie Manifesto. So that's a twofer. That's a destruction of private property and a destruction of free speech at the same time. Number 5, centralization of credit in the hands of the state. So, I have a little picture that says Greenspan, Bernanke, in the margin over here. I gave a talk at the Cato Institute many years ago on the 100th anniversary of the Sherman Antitrust Act. And for some reason, Alan Greenspan came up, and I remember mentioning that I read one of Greenspan's old articles on antitrust from one of his Ayn Rand days, and I commented that, that's before he became a central planner. And I don't know, some of the people at Cato had a big sourpuss looks on their face when I said that. They didn't want people to think of the Fed as a central planning agency, for God's sake. Centralization of communication and transportation, nationalization of all land and capital, and my favorite, free education in government schools. So that was the recipe for destructionism, Misesian destructionism in the Communist Manifesto, which he was talking about. And of course, in our day, it's a little different. The methods of destructionism, we've adopted all these things. It's all, in the United States, we've got every one of these things to some extent. We adopted them, but we're going even further today. We're going much further today. And today's Marxists, the ones that are most influential, go by the name of cultural Marxists. A little different variety of Marxism. And as I said before, after the worldwide collapse of socialism in the late 80s and early 90s, there was a conundrum among the Marxists. What are we going to do now? Some of them became what I call watermelons, green on the outside, red on the inside. Environmentalists decided to try to destroy capitalism in the name of the worms and the bugs and the snakes and Mother Nature and all that sort of thing. And the old class conflict theory didn't fly because the working class never wanted to engage in a bloody revolution and take over the factories. They just wanted a pay raise and better working conditions. And so the Marxists of the day were very upset that the working class never bought into this. So what do? Well, they set up a different type of class struggle. It's no longer the capitalist class and the working class. Now it's the oppressor class and the oppressed class. And basically the oppressors are white heterosexual males, and the oppressed is everybody else in the literature. And the goal, so because the failure of the working class to overthrow capitalism, the goal now is the destruction of Western culture, because some of the theorists, people like Antonio Gramsci, the Italian Marxist, and George Lukács, his real name is Georgi, but I'll call him George Lukács, they needed a change of strategy. And their theory was that the reason why the working class did not embrace Marxist revolutions was that Western culture and Christianity blinded them to the Marxist truth. And they claimed that the combination of Western culture, which of course would include classical liberalism, the philosophy of classical liberalism, and the institutions of capitalism themselves, and Christianity, created what Lukács called a hegemonic power which maintains the consent to the capitalist order. So he said the working class was too attached to Western culture and too attached to Christianity to be able to be convinced into destroying the capitalist order. Therefore, we must destroy Western culture and destroy Christianity. And otherwise, we will never be able to have our cultural revolution. And one good thing that Mussolini did is he imprisoned Gramsci. So we can put a hat tip to.
I wanted a husband and a family. Dan needed a wife that could wait on him.
Benito Mussolini for doing that after he started saying things like this, and of course Gramsci is known for Western culture and Christianity must be destroyed by a long march through the institutions of schools, media, churches, entertainment industry, etc. And I began noticing this, the real success that the Gramsciites and the cultural Marxists were having in the 1980s when that great intellectual giant Jesse Jackson led a group of 500 or so chanting students at Stanford. They were chanting, "Hey, hey, ho, ho, Western culture, Western civ has got to go." At the time, Stanford University was teaching a course in Western civilization, and they wanted to get rid of it, which they did. They got rid of it, and they replaced it with a course called Race, Class, and Gender Studies. And so they succeeded in that. Around the same time, there was a wealthy oil family from Texas, the Bass family, gave $20 million to Yale University, which was sort of the family alma mater there, and to endow some professorships in teaching various aspects of Western civilization at Yale. And the faculty, not every single faculty member, but a big portion of the faculty revolted against this, and ended up they had to give the money back. They gave $20 million back, and at the time it was the biggest donation ever in the history of Yale University, biggest private donation. So if there are any members of the Bass family watching, I'm looking at they're on the internet, send the money to the Mises Institute. If they're out there on the internet, we will have a degree granting program in all aspects of Western civilization, if you like. We could do that with $20 million. Okay, so Stanford replaced that. They gave the money back at Yale. The Yale faculty condemned this proposal as it was, quote, dead white European male academic agenda, and so they called for more what we need is more multicultural studies, they said. And for those of you who are not too familiar with multiculturalism in the academic context, it doesn't mean what you think it means. It means hiring socialists of different cultures, an Asian socialist, an African socialist, different cultures, an Indian socialist. So as long as the faculty are all socialists, we want them to be from different cultures. That's basically what multiculturalism means in the academic world.
Location confirmed.
Construction.
Location confirmed.